Ladies and gentlemen,
Good evening.
Are you ready?
Okay, here we go.
You're listening to the Deal Room Podcast. Join us as we bring you the inside scoop on business sales and acquisitions. Get across trends in the area and hear the industry's best recount their real-life tips, traps, and experiences. Now, here's your host, Joanna Oakey.
Hi, it's Joanna Oakey here, and welcome back to the Deal Room Podcast, a podcast proudly brought to you by our commercial legal practice, Aspect Legal. Now, today we have on the show the fabulous Nicole Segal from our very own Aspect Legal, talking about what is different between acquiring a franchise versus a standard business. So we really get stuck into what some of the benefits are, what are some of the things to be aware of, what some of the most critical parts of the franchise agreement are, and we also talk about some changes to the franchising code of conduct this year. So if you are interested in buying a franchise business or you're interested in franchising business sales and acquisitions, then this episode is for you. Here we go with our discussion with Nicole. Hello, Nicole, and welcome back to the Deal Room Podcast. It's so good to have you on the show.
Great to be here.
Wonderful, wonderful. Okay, now today, of course, we are talking about the difference between acquiring a franchise versus a standard business. So why don't you take us through it, Nicole? What is the difference in acquiring a franchise as opposed to acquiring a standard business?
Well, the major differences are that franchises have more fees, more rules, and importantly, more support and hopefully a great brand. So when you buy into a franchise, hopefully you're buying an existing product with a great support network behind you, as opposed to buying your own business and then starting from scratch.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess this is the thing with franchises, isn't it? There's this, we're talking today about the difference between acquiring a standard business versus a franchise. But I guess there is that third option of greenfield, so just starting a business from scratch. And so we talk many times on this podcast about the benefits of buying a business as opposed to starting a business from the ground up. But here we're sort of taking it one step further, buying into a franchise versus a standard business as an alternative as well to starting from scratch. So what are the things? So we talked about obviously there being more rules. So we'll talk about that in a moment, because I think that's really important for buyers to understand. Let's talk maybe about some of the things that buyers should be on alert for as they're looking at buying a franchised business. Maybe take us through what those are.
Okay, so there's a number of things buyers have to be aware of. They need to be aware that they have to strictly comply with the operating procedures, that they have limited flexibility and limited discretion when supplying their products or services. They can't make any changes to the franchise system. All changes are coming from the franchisor, and that they don't really have the control. The franchisor has the ultimate control. So I was speaking to a potential franchisee the other day, and he's buying a gym. And I went through the franchise agreement with him, which is so long. And he actually he's got a managerial role at McDonald's. And he said, oh, this is nothing compared to McDonald's. We know, a Big Mac in Sydney has to be the same as a Big Mac anywhere in the world. So the advantage is for a purchaser, when you're buying a Big Mac, you know what you're getting. But from the business owner, there's so many rules and intricacies that they need to strictly comply with. Otherwise, they could potentially be in breach.
And when you say in breach, I guess what we're talking about here is in breach of their agreement, their franchise agreement.
Yeah, so there are so many rules for franchises. So there's, of course, the franchise agreement, which is often about 100 pages, and franchisees really need to understand what this agreement contains. And it's always drafted in favour of the franchisor, and it basically explains all the rules that the franchisees must abide by, which is really essentially complying with all the franchisor's terms, conditions, complying with their policy, complying with their auditing system, their IT system, all this, the branding, of course. So there's those rules. And then there's a franchising code of conduct, which is legislation which both parties must comply with.
Brilliant. Okay, wonderful. And obviously we're talking at the moment about the franchise agreement, so let's stick with it. What do you think are the critical parts of a franchise agreement for a buyer to be thinking about, looking at, inquiring into when they're thinking about buying this particular franchise versus another, or indeed versus a standard business that's not a franchise?
So some of the critical components are the territory. Where are they actually getting? How far is the reach of that particular territory? For example, if you are buying a convenience store, you might want a large amount of territory. But if you're buying in the CBD, for example, you might not get that such a big territory. There might be a very similar convenience store across the road. So it's really important to understand what your territory is and how far your reach is, as opposed to a standalone business. If you have a standalone gym, for example, in Sydney, you can target all of Sydney. But if you have a standalone franchise, you might only have 2 or 3 suburbs, and there might be another similar franchise in 5-10 kilometres down the road. So you can really only market towards your small reach. So that's a really important restriction that franchisees need to be aware of. And of course, franchisees need to be aware of the fees. When you have your own business, all the fees go to you, and then you have to work out your expenses, etc. When you're part of a franchise, of course, you have to pay franchise fees, royalty fees, license fees, IT fees, marketing fees, service fees, admin fees. There's a whole range of fees, and then that you need to be aware of, and that needs to be accounted for.
Brilliant. Okay, wonderful. And of course, franchises have been under a lot of publicity in recent years in relation to this concern about fees needing to be paid versus what the franchisees are receiving for their fees. I guess you've seen it all, Nicole, in these franchise agreements, and what do I think many franchisees come in just thinking, well, this is how it is, take it, take it or leave it. And of course, dealing in a particular franchise, that is often the case, that the franchisor isn't going to be highly negotiable in relation to terms. But I think it's a mistake to think that just because one franchisor takes a certain position in their terms, that is the same position that any franchisor might take. So, you have these positions where perhaps there are a number of franchises that are giving franchising as a whole a bad name, but you need to make sure you're not just signing up to the terms that are dictated by a franchisor without fully understanding what those obligations will mean for you. Do you have any examples there of clauses that you've seen that you ultimately feel should be maybe even a deal killer or something that buyers should really be super careful about when they're assessing a franchise business to purchase?
Yeah, 100%. Well, first of all, franchisees need to realise that all deals can be negotiable. Just because a franchisor might be a big franchisor with their brand well known, a good lawyer will be able to get on the side of the franchisee and negotiate certain clauses. And it's often a give and take. Franchisors are keen to continue the business. Franchisors want more franchisees, so they are keen to negotiate. So you can negotiate terms, including how wide the area is, as I said, how you can negotiate fees. Some franchisors say, no, this is the fee, take it or leave it, but some franchisors are willing to negotiate fees. And also the exit provisions and the termination. Some franchise agreements are for 10 years, and that might be a bit long for someone entering into the franchise system, so they might think, maybe I want a 5-year term and another option of 5 years. So you can absolutely, with the help of a good lawyer, you can absolutely negotiate critical franchise terms to protect the franchisee.
Brilliant. Okay, wonderful. All right, so we've talked about some of the things to be aware of when you're buying a franchise. We've also touched on the benefits. So the benefit of there being systems that are in place, there being, a franchisor in place to help potentially support you in the business. What other benefits are there of buying a franchise business? Or what are the key benefits do you think that buyers should bear in mind?
So the key benefits is the branding. The key benefits is if you buy into a franchise with a good brand, you should have a group of customers willing to say, okay, well, there's this type of restaurant. I've gone to this restaurant all over Australia, potentially all over the world. I know what I'm getting. I trust this brand. I'm happy to get my sandwich or coffee or whatever it is from that particular business. Another huge benefit of franchises is that they have their own system and they have their own operating procedure. And some people have worked for another company for a number of years. They want to take the plunge and start their own business, but they don't really have the business experience. Where a franchise system, because they have all the business experience, they can say, this works, this is how you should do it, and really give them good guidance. Another benefit, of course, is the marketing systems. Franchisor, there's a pool of money that goes into marketing, and hopefully everyone uses that and is able to make more money and grow the brand. So that's a huge advantage. Another advantage is potentially cheaper supplies. So if you're buying with the franchise, the cost of the coffee or the cost of the bread or the cost of the meat or whatever you're selling, cost of gym equipment, whatever it may be, there should be bulk discounts because there's so many of them. So it's that bulk discount. So that can be a huge cost saving for a lot of businesses.
Brilliant. Okay, wonderful. Now, before we leave this topic, I think it'd be great if we could maybe have a bit of a chat about the changes to the Code of Conduct this year. And maybe if you can kick it off by talking about what the Code of Conduct is. Why should we care?
Okay, well, there's a franchising Code of Conduct, and it's really to protect both parties to an agreement. The franchising Code of Conduct has huge penalties for franchisors that breach the code, and these can be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. And that's one of the changes to the code recently, is that franchisors are more penalised if they breach the code. So part of the code has been amended to improve access to information for the franchisees and prospective franchisees, so they really understand all the financial details and all the rights, all the history of the business. This includes all details of other franchisees who left the franchise system, details of the mediation, how much litigation the franchisor was in, and these can be big red flags. If you're wanting to enter into a franchise system and you see that, hold on, 20% of franchises have been in dispute in court in the last year and 15% have left the franchise system, that's a big red flag. So that's really important information for a franchisee to be aware of. And also the franchise code is really to protect the franchisees. It has these good faith obligations that the franchisor must act in good faith when dealing with a franchisee. And, of course, the crux of any good franchise system is that everyone benefits. It's not that the franchisor is making all the money and screwing the franchisee. It really should be each party helping each other. And if the franchisee is happy, hopefully the franchisor is happy and everyone's making money together. And other changes to the code include improving access to justice and more efficient dispute resolution processes, which are really important when such big money is involved and franchisees have historically have such limited power. So it really does help the franchisee.
And in those latest changes, what are those changes? So just as a quick high level, what practically does it mean?
So practically, it means that if the franchisor is breaching the code, they have to pay really hefty penalties. Penalties were already included in the franchise code, but if franchisors are having to pay, up to $800, $900 million for breach, then they, there's more leverage for a franchisee to say, come to the table, sit with me, act in good faith, let's negotiate a settlement, otherwise I'm going to complain to the ACCC, and this is potentially, terrible for your brand and for your system. So I think that in terms of fairness, it's really helped franchisees.
Brilliant. And I guess within that, wherever there's some strengthening of these codes of conduct, of course, it becomes potentially even more attractive for buyers to come into a system that has this sort of regulation around it. Obviously I can see there's benefits to the industry as a whole. All right. Well, Nicole, huge thank you for your time today. Any parting words for our listeners who might be considering purchasing a franchise as opposed to a standard business?
Well, I think what franchisees need to do, if they are considering purchasing a franchise as opposed to a standard business, is speak to other similar franchisees. One of the beauties of the disclosure statement is they have to list all the franchisees and their phone numbers and email addresses. So get on the phone, ask other franchisees, how easy is this franchisor to deal with? Have you had any issues? How long did it take to turn a profit? What are the, strengths and weaknesses about being in the franchise? Would you want to have another franchise? Why? Why not? So it really should be some kind of community where you can really ask the really important questions before, putting so much money into a similar business.
Love it, Nicole. Just a huge thank you for coming on to the show today. And we will, of course, put in our show notes details of how you can contact Nicole and the rest of our legal eagles at Aspect Legal if you're thinking about buying a franchise or indeed selling a franchise business. Nicole, a huge thank you for coming on to the show today.
Thank you.
Well, that's it for this episode of the Deal Room podcast. We hope you're now primed for your next deal with these pointers and have enjoyed these fascinating insights. Now, if you'd like more information about this topic, then head over to our website at thedealroompodcast.com, where you'll be able to download a transcript of this episode, as well as access any contact details and any other additional information we referred to in today's podcast. Now, if you'd like to get in contact with our guests today and the services they offer, you can go ahead and check out our show notes for a link right through to them and their details. You can also book in directly with our legal eagles at Aspect Legal if you'd like to soundboard your next steps, discuss a legal question, or find out more how we can assist, whether that's with buying or selling a business, or perhaps somewhere in between. Now, don't forget to subscribe to the Deal Room podcast on your favourite podcast player to get notifications whenever a new episode is out. We'd also love to hear your feedback, so please leave us a review and rating if you're already one of our subscribers, or even if you're listening to this podcast for the very first time. Every review helps our team produce valuable content for you. Well, thanks again for listening in. You've been listening to Joanna Oakey and the Deal Room podcast, a podcast proudly brought to you by our commercial legal practice, Aspect Legal. See you next time. I am so very excited to announce that I've hit a non-podcast related milestone and released a book. You might wonder why? Simple. I wanted to help business owners understand the mechanics of deal making and the interaction between three critical phases of business: acquisition, growth, and exit. And so I am very happy to announce Buy, Grow, Exit, a guidebook for business owners and their advisors on how to buy, grow, and guess what? Exit in a way that maximizes value and avoids landmines along the way. The book is available now, so just head over to buygrowexit.com.au to get your copy and to access a whole heap of free resources that will really help you on your journey of acquisition, growth, and exit in your business or in working with your clients. Also, check out our show notes where we will link straight through to that page.
Ladies and gentlemen.
That will conclude this evening's entertainment.
Thanks for listening to the Deal Room Podcast. To find out more about this episode and other episodes in the series, check out the show notes or head over to our website at thedealroompodcast.com.au.